Needed to get unmuted there. Good afternoon, MTW agencies. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are thrilled to have you with us today. My name is Marianne Nazaro. I am the MTW Program Director here in Washington, D.C., and we are absolutely thrilled to have 29 new MTW agencies join us today. So I really appreciate you guys, being interested in MTW, tossing your name in the hat, submitting your applications, and joining us for today's webinar. We will have a series of webinars as I've noted in the various correspondence that you've received. So really today, what we wanted to do is just say a big welcome. You get to know us a little bit, we'll get to know you, introduce you with some staff, the MTW staff, just a couple of us, and then there will be plenty more to come. The field office staff is with us as well. We will then talk through really what is it to be MTW, how to execute your MTW ATC amendment, kind of going through that whole process, and pretty much at a pretty high level, kind of like nuts and bolts, like what you need from today. You got your letter, you've been selected as MTW, getting your MTW ATC amendment executed, and doing all of the steps that you need to do before you can start implementing your MTW activities. We'll be able to answer, we will also have a section on change management. Change is hard. There's a lot coming, both for you, your staff, your residents, your communities, and so we'll talk through a lot about kind of introduce some concepts of change management, and then we'll kind of learn a little bit more as we go. And so then with that, I would really like to introduce a couple of folks on the call from the MTW office that you'll be hearing from today. John Concannon is on the call. John is John is the MTW Deputy Director, so he'll be talking with you today. Allison Christensen is on the call. She's our Senior Housing Innovation Specialist. She's on the call as well. She'll be talking with you a little bit about kind of the evaluation piece. She'll be introducing our evaluators. And Jennifer Rainwater, you will hear quite a bit. Some of you have already heard from her. Jennifer will talk with you specifically about the MTW ATC amendment. What is it? How do you get it all executed? There's a number of HUD field staff on the call as well. And so we'll be able to meet them when we get into a little breakout sessions a little bit later. So now to get us excited, I want to really introduce a video. We have a video of some of the initial 39 agencies. So please just take a minute. It's just a couple minutes to hear from your now colleagues, your MTW colleagues, what they have to say about MTW. A tip for those of you like me that are calling in on your cell phone is you won't be able to hear the video through your phone. If you're calling in on your cell phone, you'll hear the video through your computer. So I have my other ear thing. This is attached to my computer. So if you're using your cell phone, turn up the volume on your computer because the video will come through that way. Our host, John Panetta, is going to mute everybody, so there hopefully won't be too much disruption. And then after that, I will ask John to unmute us and we'll continue on our way. So John, can you please go ahead with the video?
Well, you heard from some of our kind of existing original 39 MTW agencies, and we're happy to have you join that group. As you can see, there's a lot of innovation happening out there and a lot of excitement with what you can do with your MTW flexibilities. Next slide, please. So I want to welcome everyone again. Congratulations on your MTW designation. We're designated, 29 of you, and from Maine to Hawaii. So I propose the next MTW conference will be in Honolulu. But we really have a great group, some familiar names who have worked at other MTW agencies, and a really strong group of high-performing housing authorities across the country. So we just wanted to share this slide. I'm sure you've all seen it before, but just show you your peers that are there. Next slide, please. So we want to have an opportunity for you all to meet one another, because I think the best way, you can talk to us HUD in your field office and at HUD headquarters and the MTW office, but the best way to learn, we have found, and we've heard from your existing MTW agencies, is to talk to your peers. And so we are going to have 4 groups. We're going to split into kind of different regions of the country. And we're going to give you we'll have, facilitators. We have the red group, regions 1, 2, and 3, the yellow group, region 4, green group, region 5 and 8, and the blue group in regions 9 and 10, kind of how we designate our HUD regions. Allison Christensen will be facilitating the yellow group. Eva Fontine will be facilitating the green group, and Philip Pless will be facilitating the blue group, and Marianne will be facilitating the red group. We'll see if she's joined us. But again, now we're gonna, the facilitators should have the slide deck, and so you'll have, what's in your group, but for some reason, if you aren't assigned, just let the operator know and they can assign you. So with that, I'll pass it back to our operator, John.
Folks. So what's going to happen is once these breakout sessions start, you're going to see a pop-up come on your screen asking you to join the room that you're assigned. Go ahead and click the Join Now button, and it'll go ahead and push you into your room. If you end up in the wrong room, go ahead and click the red button to exit the group, confirm that you want to leave the session, and then go ahead and chat me, and I will get you into the right group. All right, Marianne, is there anything else before we move to, or John, is there anything else before we move into breakouts?
Sounds great, John.
All right, I will go ahead and start the sessions.
Thanks.
Oh my goodness. Hello, Red Group. I just saw your messages, Amanda and Sheila, and I'm sorry that I don't know if you're in the Red Group or where you were. So sorry if you're in there and I didn't see you. I hope everybody had a really good conversation. I think we're coming back to the broader group. All right. John P., do we think that we're all back?
Yes, everyone's back.
All right, cool. And including me. So thanks, John Kincannon, for stepping in there. So that was a really great conversation. I know we had a really good conversation in the Red Group. Looking forward to hearing the others. And it's really, really just great to meet you guys. So thank you guys so much. Lots of really interesting and important things that you're hoping to accomplish with your moving toward flexibility, and particularly to kind of get into those harder to serve areas. So we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we are going to talk about all of the steps that need to happen between today, quite frankly, Thursday, when you got the letter from Dominique Blum saying, welcome to MTW, until you are able to start implementing your first MTW activities. So I mentioned the MTW ACC amendment. You're going to hear Jenny's going to talk about that. We're going to talk about preparing the finances to get ready for that funding flexibility, continuing with that public process, and developing, as you figure out exactly what you want to do, and developing that supplement, the supplement to the PHA plan, the PIC modernization, talk about the evaluation piece, and then also until we get to that final approval of that supplement from the field office and implementation. So what we're doing today is we're kind of going through like a high level of all of this, except for the ACC, we're diving into that. And then in the webinars to come, we will be doing a deep dive into all of the different pieces. So definitely pay attention, but there'll be plenty, but you don't need to like remember everything that we're talking about today, because there will be plenty more webinars to come. And with that, Jenny, I am going to turn it over to you to start talking about the MTW ACC amendment. Jenny Rainwater.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Marianne. What the breakout group that I was in, it was a great breakout group. So thank you, everybody who was there, talking about why they were joining Moving to Work and what they were hoping and expecting. And one of the things that I just brought up is someone said to me once, you don't have to eat the whole elephant in the first sitting. And so as you're joining MTW, you have this big elephant that's just come to town. It's just one bite at a time. So we're just going to talk about step one in that list that Marianne had on the previous slide. This is the first thing, frankly, that you guys need to think about, pay attention to, and do before moving forward. It's completing and executing the MTW ACC amendment. And as it says on this slide, just quickly, this is really boilerplate language. It's kind of legalese, but this is the document that needs to be signed. And this is what you need to do before you can move on and before you can begin to use your funds flexibly. So as you can see in the box that's outlined on this slide, you can find the document, so you can find a copy of that Moving to Work ACC amendment. And this is a great place to go on the MTW website. So I just highlight that, pay attention to that. But when this is the link above is the email box where you will submit that signed MTW ACC amendment. Okay, next slide, please. If you haven't looked at the ACC amendment before, or the Moving to Work ACC amendment, it has about 9 sections. So sections 1 through 4, if you look at it more closely, it does talk about how it is an agreement entered into between HUD and your PHA or your agency. It also, in section 2, it does apply to all the other ACCs that might be in effect for public housing and your voucher program. It talks also about how it being a part of this Moving to Work demonstration, you are governed by what's called the Mtw Operations Notice. So I would strongly encourage you to take a look at that, see what is in the Operations Notice, because that will very much define what you can and cannot do and how you go about it. So that's a very important document. In fact, so important, I actually literally printed it out. So I had it at the corner of my desk. In section 4, obviously we're looking at a 20-year term. Today it's even hard to think about tomorrow, but 20 years is what we're looking at for the term of this demonstration. Next slide, please. Okay, in section 5, these are really, really important. As I said in the slide previously, you are required and must. I learned that must was a really important word, not just when mom and dad said it, but in working within a local housing authority or an agency related to housing and related to the Moving to Work. When they use the word must, you must operate in accordance with the MTW Operations Notice. So that is a key thing you want to be looking at, paying attention to. That will be the guiding document in your program as you design your program. The other really important part as you are coming in to the Moving to Work demonstration as part of this cohort is that you must also be working with the researchers and contractors who are going to be studying what you are doing at your agency. Again, we want to show proof of the utility of what's happening. And this isn't like having a blank check. You really, as you look at the Operations Notice and look at what it's referring to, Moving to Work is talking about exemptions from provisions in the Housing Act of 1937 specifically. So again, as it notes here, it loops back to, describes again, the MTW Operations Notice. So again, a really key piece of paper with lots of writing on it. Next page, please. Or not, next page, next slide, yes. So section 6 talks about how essentially kind of you're going to wind down. If the program isn't extended again, right, we're looking at a 20-year term, So in year 19, this section calls out what would be included in a transition plan. You guys are looking at creating a transition plan today of how are you going to implement these things. But 20 years from today, if that isn't extended, how are you going to, what are you going to do next? If you can't continue to go forward with what you have implemented, just what does that look like? What does that duration look like? So this section talks about that transition. So it's, again, it's a forward-looking piece. It's probably not something you want to think about today, but just to be aware. The next slide, please. Okay, this section can be seen as kind of scary, frankly, because it's talking about termination and default. So it's outlining all the things that you have to be aware of. And let's say you aren't, you kind of go off to left field and we realize, you know, something wasn't right and something then needs to be corrected. So this section is talking about that. If there's, you know, what's going to happen, you know, this list of 7 items within this slide, you know, additional reporting possibility. It may result in monies owed or that application in a little bit of a different way. It may restrict, you know, an agency's ability to use funding, the MTW funding flexibilities, but that is what this section is talking about of that Moving to Work ACC. Okay, next slide. This is the other piece just to keep in mind. If there are laws put into place in the future that conflict within the MTW ACC, the future law will be what prevails. So as we move forward in time, again, we aren't omniscient. We can't predict what's going to happen next or control everything that's going to happen next. But the future law will prevail, frankly. So Section 8 and Section 9 is talking about that. Next page. Slide. Sorry, everybody. Okay, so those are the sections of the Moving to Work ACC amendment. So what does it mean when we're talking about signing that? You know, how do you go about that? What does that mean? So what you want to do is, if you don't already have it, really work with your board, get to know them. I mean, one of the key pieces I can say from experience is for them to know and understand what you're talking about as you're looking at implementing this Moving to Work thing. But have them be a partner with you, have them clearly understand, because you want to bring this Moving to Work ACC amendment to them so that they can review it, you can review it together, and you can secure their approval, because they're going to have to prove, kind of like you did when you basically submitted your Moving to Work application, right? There had to be board approval of that. And part of that approval is usually, we'll see it on one of the next slides coming up, is your board resolution may include that the board is giving the executive director the ability to sign these types of documents. I mean, who is going to be that authorized person? So the next piece here in this flow chart is that the agency signs. So once you've determined through your coordination with your board, the agency will sign it and then submit that. The other piece of the signature is that it has to be actually pen and ink, what's considered a wet signature. In today's day and age, we've gotten very used to electronic signatures like DocuSign and other software that helps with that. But this document actually has to be a physically signed document by whoever is designated to be doing so for your agency. And then that gets submitted to this email box on this slide that says MTW Landlord Incentives. That is the email box that your selection letter from HUD came. So that official document that you guys received came from this particular email box. So this is where you're going to now send your signed MTW ACC. The other piece that you want to include with that is what's called your board resolution, and we are going to go through an example on one of the next slides talking about that. So the board resolution and the signed wet signature MTW ACC should be sent together to this email box. When that is received by us, we will review it, and it will go through where it needs to for approval, and HUD will sign and date it. That date of HUD's signature is literally your entry date into the Moving to Work demonstration. So you've been selected now by fulfilling this process, submitting that document and getting it back, basically countersigned by HUD, means that you are now effectively a part of the Moving to Work demonstration, and it's considered fully effective or fully executed and in effect. Okay, next slide, please. So when you look at the Mtw ACC amendment, you're going to see that there is a series of signature block line. And just to go over it, sometimes this is kind of, you're like, well, I don't know what to put on which line. So you can see on the first line, it says that's the actual person. It's their wet signature that they're putting along that line, that top line. The next one that says by, that would be where you would print that individual's name. It relates to what their title is. So it could be executive director, it could be the chairperson of the board, and the date that they signed that document. So that is the document that you would then submit to the Mtw Landlord Incentives email box. Next slide. This document is something we're providing to you as an example. This is not required language. This is an example of the board resolution. If you have one that you normally use, you can absolutely use yours. What it needs to be sure that it includes is that it has been reviewed. The Moving to Work Mtw ACC amendment has been reviewed and approved by your board. And if your board is going to have someone else sign that document, that language is included. So you can see on this example, even on the screen, that there are two parts of the resolution. One is that they're effectively approving it, and they're, in this case, authorizing the executive director to execute the documents required. So that is the purpose of that. And this example document, which you are free to use, but you're not required to, is on the Moving to Work website. So again, if you want to go and see this in full, you can absolutely do that. You could download it, use it, or use it as an example if you want to grab some of the language as you're putting together what is a normal board resolution for you. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, hey, I like that slide. I don't know about you guys, but Marianne, if I could turn this back to you.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Jenny.
Sure.
That's a lot of really important information on the Mtw ACC amendment. I think that's the kind of the key takeaway is to review it, understand it, talk to your lawyers about it, put it through the public process, get your board to review it, get it over to us. And then once the General Deputy Assistant Secretary signs it, you are officially an Mtw agency. So with that, we're going to take a short break to kind of let everything absorb. I have 2:48 Eastern, 10 minutes. We will meet back here at 2:58 Eastern Standard Time, and we will get to start talking about some of the other steps. So thanks, everybody. 10 minutes, see you back here at 2:58. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your little break. We strategically placed it after the ACC amendment discussion and before we give you kind of a high-level snapshot on the Mtw finances, supplement, transition to PIC modernization, et cetera. So now I would like to turn it over to if we can go to the next slide, I'd like to turn it over to John Kincannon, who you've heard from already, and he can start talking us through the next several steps in becoming fully Mtw. John.
Thanks, Maria, and welcome back, everyone, and congratulations again on your new Mtw status. So we've just covered the first step in kind of a lot more detail. Jenny walked you through executing your ACC amendment. What Allison and I will be walking through are steps 2 through 7. And, you don't have to be feverishly writing all of this down. We're just providing this to you just to show you kind of what's coming down the line in terms of what our future webinars and what you need to know. And for those of you who are, chomping at the bit, we know you've applied, came to us a while back for eligibility checks and have been working with your communities to submit applications. So you're probably looking to start drafting out or sketching out what you want to do with your MTW flexibility. This will give you a little taste of that. But again, steps 2 through 7 are just providing it to give you a preview of what's to come. So the first is, preparing your agency's finances. As we hear from all MTW agencies, the greatest flexibility is be able to use all of your housing choice voucher and public housing funds flexibly. Now that funding, MTW funding flexibility kicks in the first day of the month following your MTW ACC amendments execution. So if it were executed today, it would kick in on March 1st. That funding piece, as we know, is key. Now, in thinking this through, and your financial and accounting staff, if you want to look at some great resources, we have 3 of them, and we have a webinar on the HUD Exchange, MTW Finance webinar. We really recommend you looking at. Section 5 of the Operations Notice details funding, all the different funding renewals, and walks through it. Recommend looking at that. And also, there is an online manual that's been put together that is really user-friendly that we recommend looking at as well. Now, when thinking it through, you want to think through the potential changes to financial policies. If you are moving funds around, you're going to want to make sure you have the right, accounting systems, or that your staff is ready to go there. So just think about that. There unfortunately is no waiver of cash management or 2 CFR Part 200. Everything you do under MTW still has to adhere to this Part 200. And just lastly, understand that there will be MTW reporting differences, and we will get into all of that. We have not one but two webinars on this. First is on March 9th on financial policies and procedures, and the second part is on March 23rd on just reporting alone. So I would recommend looking over these resources and come with your questions ready. Next slide, please. In thinking, in future looking, we have an MTW supplement to the PHA plan. This is, you all will not submit quote unquote MTW plans as kind of our initial agencies do. We have just created an addendum or a supplement to your PHA plan that lays out what activities you plan to do, how you're going to spend your funds, and your plans for the year. Just trying to sync it up with the process that you already do now. But this MTW supplement, it's designed to, inform HUD, inform the families that you serve at the PHA, and to inform your community. And it's also something that, this is a demonstration program. We're trying to learn from you all around landlord incentives, but also everything else you're doing. So it's something we will be able to pull from to see what you're doing, to see if there are improved outcomes that we can then, spread to the rest of the non-MTW agencies across the U.S. But the MTW supplement has to go through a public process. Up to 2 required public meetings. The first would be, with your normal PHA plan, you would, have your meeting about the MTW supplement to review what's in it. The difference here is up to 2 means if you're going to implement any we're calling agency-specific waivers or safe harbor waivers, that would require its own public hearing. And that's because they could potentially have, a lot of significant impacts on families and your community. So we just want to make sure that's heard out there. Now you could have, your standard, your PHA plan and MTW supplement meeting at 6 p.m. and you could have your additional meeting at 7 p.m. It can be on the same day or evening. But we just want to make sure that's looked at. But we really want to encourage you to, solicit feedback. We've heard great stories, anecdotes about PHAs using, Zoom and having to rely on some alternate methods just to get out and hear from your participants. But even if you're following, just in-person meetings at developments or properties, to really incorporate that feedback, because you have a lot more flexibility here, and incorporate feedback from the community, because you're able to really, tailor what you do to, your needs at the community level. And based on that feedback, possibly could be making changes to or adapting to what you're hearing. So there's a whole public process. We will be drilling it in. We know you all do this now, but really think it makes for a much better MTW program if you're working with your community. Almost goes without saying. Next slide, please. After you've gone through that public process, then you'll submit your supplement to HUD. Now, we have a web-based system which you'll submit this MTW supplement, and we will, give you the keys to the supplement once we have fully executed your ACC amendment. But prior to that, you can, if you want to have some sort of working Word document that you can, easily copy and paste it into our system, that's certainly encouraged if you're looking to get going sooner. But you'll electronically submit it through our web-based system, and you'll receive approval from your HUD field office, same with how you do now. And you need that approval before we can implement any quote-unquote MTW waivers or MTW activities, anything outside of the normal Section 8, Section 9 rules. You need that approval from your field office. So you're going to continue to submit your annual plan along with the MTW supplement. And we have upcoming webinars on those, April 13th, and to talk more in depth with what I've sped through in a slide on the MTW supplement and the public process. And on May 4th, we're going to walk through the supplement itself. Next slide, please. Now, we will, because you have so many flexibilities, the traditional the Form 50058 that you report all your tenant level data in PIC, it just doesn't work for MTW because, let's say you're modifying the, families paying, 30% of adjusted income. If you change that to a different percentage, you're going to have problems in the PIC system. Or if you're eliminating deductions and whatever it may be, you have a lot of flexibility. So we've designed a lot more flexible form to account for all of these varieties and these different rent methods that you're doing and landlord incentives. And so that is captured in the HUD 5058 MTW expansion. And it will be rolled out with our new IMS PIC modernization system. I know you've been hearing this from REACT for years. It's really happening. And MTW expansion agencies will be some of the first to be on this new system. We're going to have a lot more on this later, but just planting the seed right now. And we'll also be migrating your tenant and public housing building and unit data to this IMS PIC modernization. So that will be coming down the line as well. And again, more on that to come. Next slide, please. So with this, I'm going to pass it to a senior member of our team, Allison Christensen, to walk through the last two steps. Allison.
So much, John. As John said about some of his slides too, we're not going to go into too terribly much detail on the evaluation today or the other category, but just want to let you know that this stuff is coming and there'll be more information provided to you a little later on. So you all know that you joined the MTW expansion as a part of the landlord incentives cohort. We had a great discussion in my breakout group about some of the things the agencies were hoping to achieve with their landlord incentives, and I can't wait to see what other agencies have in mind as well. We at HUD are taking over the evaluation kind of requirements for the MTW expansion, which is great because it gives the agencies the ability to run their programs and to focus on your households and the things going on locally, and it leaves the evaluation to HUD and our colleagues in our Office of Policy Development and Research. So we already have a third-party evaluator on board to conduct the evaluation of the landlord incentives cohort. The firm is called Apt Associates. And then I would like to introduce two of the managers who will be working on the project, who you'll be hearing from a lot. We have Meryl Finkel, who's the Principal Associate and Study Project Manager, and Anna Mahathi, who is an associate and a study assistant project manager. So I don't know if Meryl and Anna are on to say a quick hello to everybody. We'll be seeing them.
This is Meryl, and I'm looking forward to talking to folks on February 16th about the evaluation and what we will be asking the participating housing authorities to do for the evaluation. So looking forward to seeing you all in the next webinar.
Great, thank you so much, Meryl. And as Meryl mentioned, there will be a webinar on February 16th is when you'll go into more detail about the evaluation and what Apt will be working with you and your others at your agency to get information on your landlord incentives activities and just getting to know them a little bit better. So as it's on the slide here, and as Meryl said, it's on February 16th. So that one is coming up. So next slide, please. The seventh step we have is to receive written approval of the PHA plan and MTW supplement from the local HUD field office. So John went through all the steps about going through the public process, getting that supplement submitted to HUD through our online system. So you'll get lots more information on that. So this slide is just to note that you need that written approval of the MTW supplement before you can move forward with any of your MTW activities. So you get that funding flexibility after that ACC is fully executed, but you can't implement any specific MTW activities until after the MTW supplement is approved by HUD. So you will get, similar to your PHA plan, you will get a letter from your local field office saying that the PHA plan and the MTW supplement has been reviewed and you are approved to move forward. And at that point, you can begin implementation. And, there's a lot of stuff that goes on to the agency, we understand, before you actually get going with your activities. You have to update your ACC or your, admin plan and your ACOP. You train your staff and get everybody up to speed. Notify your households of the implementation plan of when these activities will start happening. So there's a lot out of after step 7 that you'll be working with locally. But once you have that approval letter in hand from HUD on your MTW supplement, you can begin all those implementation steps. So I believe that's the last in our steps to get ready for MTW. Go to the next slide and give it back to Marianne.
Awesome. Thank you, John and Allison. And I see there are a few questions in the chat, and I encourage you as we're going along, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat feature and we will be sure to come back at the end and either answer them during today's call or separately as an insider. So please go ahead and send any questions that you may have. And Allison has gone over all of the steps that it is that you need to take to actually start implementing your MTW activities. We want to switch gears for a moment. Just kind of take a step back and think about what implementing MTW will mean for you, for your organization, your staff, the families that you serve, your board, your community, the landlords, all of that. There's going to be changes, and as we all know, changes can be hard. So we want to kind of help, and this is some feedback actually that we heard from the MTW expansion agencies from the prior two cohorts, that it would be really helpful to talk a little bit more about like change management. What does that mean? Help us do that. And so we want to bring everybody along here on this journey and to help you kind of manage this chain effectively, efficiently. So we're going to be talking a little bit about change management. And so to do that, I am thrilled to welcome and introduce Candace Blair Cronin. She's a change management expert, and she's going to talk a little bit more about what is change management. How can it help you with your MTW implementation and throughout the overall process? And then so what we're doing today is we're going to kind of talk about it, get some fundamental understanding about what it means, and then going forward throughout the various webinars for onboarding, we'll be sharing different ideas and examples as to how you might be able to apply some of these concepts into the work that you're doing. So with that, Candace, I would like to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Marianne, and I'm excited to be here today. Of course, my voice would go out right at the beginning of my talk. So I just want to say, just give a nod again. I know Marianne just said this, change can be hard. We really want you to be thinking through what these changes are going to mean for your staff, the residents, the property managers, landlords, even the board. I heard that in our breakout session. So it's very important to be kind of very proactive in thinking through how these changes are going to impact others. And as Marianne said, changes can be hard. So today I'm going to give you a little crash course in kind of the principles of change management. It's really important as we approach change that we do so with enthusiasm and empathy, but also in a very systematic, intentional manner so that we encourage kind of smooth transitioning, right? And that we're really helping all of those that are impacted by these changes kind of move along with us. So I think that's going to be really important. The first thing we're going to do is start with a cool little activity, because I like to kind of get folks engaged in the presentation and thinking about how these changes are going to impact you and those that you're going to have to interact with, right? So we have a couple of questions here, and I'll just explain how this is going to work. On your screen, hopefully you're all able to see this via computer, because you're going to need a computer for this. There's a QR code, which you can just use your cell phone and push the camera button and then scan the QR code, and you'll see a little like yellow box, usually it's yellow, but a little box pop up and you click on it and it'll take you directly to the question. Or if that's not working or easy for you, you can go to menti.com and enter the code provided there in that blue box. And we're going to ask you 2 questions to get you thinking about how people are going to process these changes or how they're likely to process them. And really to also self-reflect on like, what do these changes mean for me, and what are my feelings around this? So I know we're going to talk about feelings, because feelings really a lot of times are what lead us down the path to being either receptive to change or to being resistant to change. So that's a really important place to start. So with that in mind, what's really cool is as you enter your responses, you'll get to see the responses, and you won't see who provided what. It's an anonymous poll, but you'll be able to see all the different responses from the other folks on the phone. So it's kind of a cool way. There's this cool little word cloud that gets presented, and it shows you what others are thinking. So again, we'll go ahead and move to that. We're going to, Laura's going to show us on the screen some of the responses that are popping up. But if you haven't done so already, please scan that QR code. And we're going to answer these 2 questions. The first question is, how are you and your colleagues feeling about the changes that MTW is going to bring to your work? So just start typing in your thoughts. Oh, it's so cool. Everybody's already doing this. I love to see that. So, and when you start to type in your thoughts, you're going to see the whole spectrum of everything from excited to nervous to overwhelmed to, you know, kind of feeling burnt out. So this is like, you know, one more thing to consider. Yeah, more work. I like that. Scary excited. I like that. I like the folks that are sort of like, I'm apprehensive, but I also think this could be really, a really exciting opportunity here. Dollar signs, headaches. Yeah, I love the authenticity in the answers and the truthfulness, candor here. I think that's really important because again, the more that we're honest about how we think it's going to impact us and our colleagues, the more we can be thoughtful about the whole change process and be more intentional in planning for changes. And sometimes just by saying, you know what, I understand what you're going through. can certainly help bring people on board. So I think we don't want to be shy about acknowledging our feelings. So I'm sorry, I'll be quiet for 1 second. We'll let people, a few more pop up here. Oh, I see some acronyms. I'm gonna have to look these up. I feel like my teenagers might know them, but I don't know them. I think I saw one acronym. Maybe that got spelled out already. All right. Great, folks. Okay, it looks like, oh, we're still kind of populating things. So how fun is this word cloud? So again, you're seeing the whole spectrum of reactions to the MTW programmatic changes and the changes you think that those are going to create for your staff, your organization, for your residents. And actually, well, I've asked you to think about your colleagues here. I'm sorry, I'm asking you to think internally, but now we're going to move to the next question, which is thinking more externally about how are your residents going to be feeling about these changes that MTW will bring along? And you can provide more than one entry if you'd like to, because people are usually feeling multiple emotions about these things. So feel free to start answering that question. And this is just another fun way to present the responses. So some of you are very linear in your thinking, like me, and you probably like this better than the word cloud. So we all have different preferences. Great. Guarded, resistant, hopeful, lifting, hopeful, apathetic. Some of us have been through a lot of change, so we all feel kind of the world has changed over the last couple of years. So certainly we have that to factor in. So we've asked you to think internally about changes, and we've asked you to think externally about your residents, right? In these couple of activities. And I think what's interesting is how much those feelings often line up, right? So I think this is a great way, again, for us to kind of build empathy and to realize that, all of those feelings of being overwhelmed or hesitant or maybe even excited, there's finally opportunity, right? Is what a lot of folks, are going to be experiencing too. But so I think it's, again, a great to be thinking internally, reflect on our own feelings about this, because as we communicate, and I said the word authenticity, I'll say the words transparency, but a lot of that, how we feel about something is going to be reflected in our communication, whether it's intentional or not. So I think it's really important for us to be aware of that. Cool. Okay, people are still adding. Oh my goodness, I love this. I love this participation. Thanks, folks. All right, so just to recap, as I mentioned, for staff and residents alike, and for other stakeholders, the agencies you work with, the landlords, the property management, I know we even talked about the board in our breakout session, advocates in the community, there are going to be changes. And I think, we realized that, and we realized that as we were presenting today. And so we wanted to really give you a sense for what is really important to think about when you're approaching change and how to help make that process as smooth as possible. So we're going to kind of shift gears here to talk about the 4 key building blocks of a change management process. And by the way, I really like these activities. I could sort of do these all day and dig deeper about how you all feel, but we want to make sure you walk away with some of the foundational pieces here. So this represents kind of, there are a number of different change management models. I just want to give a nod to that. But these are this is probably the most simplified way to think about it. And it's also a really valuable tool. Notice people are at the center of that. So we just talked about feelings and people and thinking, and we're going to talk about the 4 phases. I just want to say this is overly simplistic in the sense that this diagram shows you going from kind of in this nice sequential fashion, which I think it's still somewhat true, but you also sometimes have to back up, like the arrows going clockwise, but sometimes you get to implement and you realize I've got to switch back to planning. And so just keeping that in mind, there's going to be some back and forth that happens across these phases. I'm going to say a couple things. I mentioned the word intentionality earlier. That's key. Sequencing is important. And then involvement of key people in decision making is really, those are all part of enacting change effectively and promoting smooth change. Okay, so I heard people talk today about hosting the public forums and how there was confusion about the MTW, and they were able to get more information, and some of the confusion actually allowed for opportunity to share more details about the MTW or to people were sort of receptive to hearing things because they were confused, which is interesting. So I think this translates really nicely, those examples, into creating a case for change. So the reason we say it's important to create a case for change, which is really the why behind the change, WHY, the why behind the change, is that change is the situation. It's what's happening to me, right? It's sort of external from me. But then there's transition, which is my mindset, and that's my internal, and that usually trails what's happening. It may take me a while to get on board with what's happening, and like I'm still back here, but this train is moving, so to speak. And so it's important, the more that we can synchronize our transition, our mindset, and move along with what's happening in the situation, in the context, the more seamless things will be. So again, the case for change is really exploring the why. So as you kind of look into the MTW, it's good to kind of think through yourself. It's like, okay, why is this change likely occurring? What are some positives of this change? And how is this potentially leading to improvement? And then really thinking through the implications, like how is this change going to necessitate additional changes in structure, or how we operate our business internally, as well as how is this going to lead to impacts on residents and staff. And one thing I want to make abundantly clear as we're creating the case for change, I say this in so many different forums, but probably if there's one thing you could hear here, science tells us giving people a voice early on, the sooner the better, the more likely they are to buy into something new, right? So we know that there's social science research behind it. But the beauty in this is that you don't have to have all the decisions, right? So a lot of times, let's say if we're in a leadership role, we think, oh gosh, I've got to figure all this out and then I'll tell staff what's going to happen to them. And that's frankly backwards in a way from what the science is telling us. They're saying, no, you get those staff, those frontline staff, and you talk to them and say, hey, how do you think this is going to affect the residents? How do you see this affecting you? Here are some of the changes we've noted. What do you think you're going to need in terms of resources? So that's really a valuable discussion. So again, you don't have to come at this with all the answers. Bringing key people in early on and getting their perspectives is a great decision-making tool and highly effective. So we're building the case for change. We're trying to understand why. Then we're going to plan for the change. This is really the pragmatics of things. We want to make sure we have specific action steps, what's going to be done, when and how, what resources are needed, and then determine the best way to communicate about this. I talk about identifying change champions early on. So, finding some people are going to just jump right on board quickly, and then they might even pull back. Some will prefer the old way of doing things. Some like the new way. Some have historical, traumas and experiences that they're bringing, or a history of dealing with a lot of change, and so they're kind of resistant. So to the extent you can identify people who are going to be influential with the individuals you're dealing with, whether it's the landlords, the residents, even your staff, identify some change champions to help you move through those action steps. And, be sensitive to the different responses that people are going to have, right? So that we're kind of empathetic that even somebody who's resistant at first might become your greatest, change champion in the long run, because they're really going to be asking all the important questions, and then they might jump right on board. Then we go to implement change. And again, this is how you roll out steps in a sequential step-by-step fashion. This is why it's so important to have kind of that work plan in place. And I heard Jennifer say earlier, like, don't, eat the elephant all at once, bite off pieces. I think that's exactly what this is. We want to prevent shock and backlash by saying, okay, what are the key things that have to happen immediately? And what are the things that we can do maybe more gradually? And what's going to be the sequencing of that? And then also I want to say, a big important point of implementation is being willing to pivot when things aren't going well, right? So making sure that we're not on the defensive. Again, this is why it's so valuable to get input at the very beginning, as opposed to like us making all the decisions if we're in a leadership role and then rolling those out. Because the more you get input, it's less likely you'll have to pivot. It doesn't mean you won't have to, but it's a lot of times you've already got that buy-in that you need. You've already heard all the different perspectives. But let's just say something gets rolled out and there's a lot of resistance and it's just not working well. It's okay to say, you know what, let's back up to the step 2, the plan, revise our plan. We don't have to throw everything out, the baby with the bathwater, but we can make some adjustments, okay? It's always good though to have that plan. It's kind of like the justification for why you're doing it the way you're doing it. It's also a good way to track yourself. And then we'll talk about sustaining change. So when changes have been made, we need to constantly gather information and perceptions about, do what we call pulse surveys. Those can be just informal, quick questionnaires. They can be done in a myriad of fashions over the phone, and via email, but just to be asking questions about, how is this going, and making sure that we're, again, we want to make sure that the transition piece, the mindset, is aligning with the situational changes. And then I mentioned the word transparency before. This sustain piece, it's very important to be transparent about what's working well and what's not. Transparency leads to trust, which again helps with transition. So if people feel like, I'm being honest here, like I tried this was my idea, or I thought this was going to work great and it's not, people are really much more likely to kind of trust you and move along with you as you implement new changes. We can move to the next slide there, Laura. So just, Marianne mentioned this a minute ago, but we will be rolling out in future webinars some really practical tools for you to use. I call them like plug and play. So I hope you're excited for that, but I just want to kind of briefly showcase these. So I talked about phase one being building the case for change. These are some of the questions you can read here that the case for change should be answering. Where are we gonna, it's really about anticipating the challenges, planning ahead for them, thinking through how these changes are going to affect every different group of individuals that you're going to work with. And so we're going to give you some introspective questions tool. And as a trained facilitator, I know the way we ask questions is one of the most powerful things in terms of encouraging buy-in to something new, okay? So sometimes even how we ask questions of ourselves and how we go about self-reflecting can really shift our own mindset towards something, right? And so I think that introspective questions tool is going to be really valuable. It's literally going to be like a worksheet and some ideas of questions to be asking, to thinking through in advance about the why for this change. And then the readiness assessment tool is really a little bit more external to see, okay, how ready and receptive are other folks going to be to change? And what might be some of the hiccups, so that again, we're anticipating those challenges in advance. And then the planning for change, those are some of the questions on this slide that would be answered as you start to plan for change. And as I mentioned, this is kind of the pragmatics piece, like what needs to happen next. And one of the valuable things is to really map out who are the key players, who are the people that I need to engage at every step as I roll out the changes, which will happen in the next phase in the implementation. And then the strategic communications plan is also a valuable tool because it's about saying, identifying what is the content of my messaging, what's the timing of my messaging, who needs to receive it, what's the best way to disseminate that message. Goodness knows, one of the biggest things I see failures in terms of where I see things really fall apart is lack of communication. I bet all of you could think of an example if we had time to ask, but I didn't get all the information, or it didn't get to me in the same timing as it got to somebody else. And so this is why being intentional and thinking through that in advance is really integral to the success of rolling out these changes. Great, and on to the next one, implement change. So again, we're talking about the implementation piece, and this is really, mentioning, so what we talked about here was sequencing the key person. So I talked earlier about mapping out who all the people are, but this is really about kind of understanding the network of where do I get information? If somebody has a question on this, where do I go for that? And so it's really going to be a template to help you kind of think through how individuals interrelate to each other and where to go for key resources. And so it's really going to be a tool that helps you go through that sequencing activity, just so you make sure that when you're implementing the change that you're doing it in a very sequential fashion. And then finally, the active listening. Again, this is and feedback loops. If you remember, I said, make sure you're constantly engaging and getting input on how the change is going so that you know when you need to pivot and make different decisions and different changes, right? So I think active listening there's some great tools out there that will kind of pull together in a way that's customized for you, as well as some tools on gathering feedback and being receptive to feedback. And then finally, when we sustain change, we want to constantly monitor how things are performing and make sure that we're developing performance indicators that are really good metrics of how things are working and where do we need to make adjustments, what are the perceptions that individuals have about how things are moving along. And then ultimately, as I mentioned before, you will have people that are resistant. And so we're going to give you some, readings and resources to look through for those to really make that shift. Now, finally, and again, I know this is just a teaser, those black boxes, we don't have those tools to show you today because of time's sake, but we will be rolling those out in future sessions. So we're really excited to give you those and really get to the practical aspect here of how do I leverage what you're hearing from me today? How can you leverage that to make positive improvements and get folks on board to these MTW changes? Finally, this slide, I just want to be clear that we don't necessarily, we're a neutral broker here. So the next slide that we're going to is these are a couple resources for those of you that are just super excited about this idea of change management and you want to get ahead and start reading. These are a couple of websites you can visit. And again, we're not pushing either one of these organizations. We do know that they have some quality research on change management. But again, we will be developing customized tools, but these are just really here for those of you that are like eager to start digging into change management right away. So thank you for listening in today. And I certainly am excited about what's coming for all of you. And I'm excited that you're part of this program. I think it's certainly a meaningful program, and I'll turn it back to you, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Candace. That was a lot of really good information, and thank you so much for providing those tools. And just, we went through a lot of information today. And again, for the most part, we wanted to just give you kind of a snapshot of a lot of things and what's to come. Those word clouds, I'm definitely of the camp. I love seeing the word cloud, the heat, and see like what words are popping up more. And we definitely saw a lot of excitement and hopeful and, looking forward to what's coming. And we also saw a lot of overwhelmed and scared and nervous. And so that's normal. That's great, right? That's change. This is a big deal. You all have been thinking about this for a long time, and it's finally here. We are here both in the MTW offices and the field offices. We are here to help you every step of the way. We have created this kind of series of onboarding sessions to provide you with the information that you need to be able to successfully get started. And so hopefully you'll find this series helpful. And if you have any, questions, or if there's anything specific that you guys would like to hear or to talk about, just definitely let us know. Like I said earlier, that change management plug, we heard that from the initial, from the first couple cohorts of expansion agencies. So we wanted to give you guys a little bit of those resources. So now, that's basically it. We're going into questions now. Again, if you have any questions, please add them to the chat box, and we will answer them as we are able to right now, and or we will make sure to cover them in a future webinar. So first I received, and so John, I've got a couple for you. One of them is, I think, available for everybody to see. Another one just came directly to me. So John, get ready. So this first question is about kind of like finance reporting. And the question is, the notice indicated that MTW flexibility and fungibility does not apply to special purpose vouchers like FUP, BASH, et cetera. How does that work? Do there need to be two different sets of admin plans, two different budgets? John, do you want to take that?
Yep, that's a great question, Jennifer. What I'm going to do, I had this one ready, teed up. I just sent to everyone. We have a special purpose voucher FAQ. These are questions we get all the time. So we have this handy document. I will say this is something we're going to get into in future webinars, but I'm just sending it to you now. But one thing I will just say for your special purpose vouchers, keep in mind that, for BASH and for FUP, you have to keep those funds separate. They just can't be moved to other purposes just because of how their statutes are written and requirements around those. But there are also flexibilities. And for all these special purpose vouchers, for the most part, you can apply your MTW flexibilities to them, but there's a process you have to go through to do that. So for HUD-VASH, you'll have to, send just a request to align your MTW policies to your VAS vouchers. Go to the field office sends it to the voucher office. But there's a process there. So you only need one admin plan. You don't have to create multiple admin plans. So that's sort of a preview, sneak peek, but we'll get into that more. We kind of can walk through that more fully, what that means. But you have that FAQ if you want to look ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, John, and thank you, Jennifer, for the great question. And as John said, we have 2 webinars specifically focused on finances. I think John also referred you to, in the slides, we talked about a webinar that we did in October of 2020 that talks about MTW funding flexibility as well. Definitely encourage you to take a look at that, have your CFOs take a look at that as well. Another question came to me privately, but I think you all would be interested in this. You may have a similar question. John, I'm going to send this to you as well. The question relates to, I have not seen any information regarding the 5-year plan, only the annual plans. Would the MTW plan replace the 5-year plan, or do you merely include an MTW component 2-year plan? And I'm asking this because we're currently putting it together for the July submission.
Yeah, another good question. And again, we have some supplement webinars coming up, but you still have to submit the 5-year plan. And so you'll want to make sure for the goals and objectives and for your significant amendment, and make sure that's all aligns with what you want to do with your MTW status. And then so with your annual plan submission, you would also submit your MTW supplement, or if it's your 5-year, submit your 5-year. So they would have to be in alignment. And if that doesn't answer your question completely, we'll get into that in future webinars.
Great, thanks, John. We have a question, an evaluation type question from Shantae Evans. Shantae, welcome back to MTW. Shantae was at the Charlotte Housing Authority back in the day, is now in Spartanburg, and now back as an MTW agency there. Welcome back. So Shantae, I think you can unmute yourself to ask your question. John P., do I have that right? Or does she have to do it in the chat?
Hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Hello. Thank you. I'm glad to be back. I wanted to, I guess, ask it because it may be harder to type it. So prior experience with MTW through research, for instance, with Charlotte, we used UNC Chapel Hill to evaluate our initiatives. And I just heard you talk about PD&R, and of course, we're being studied under this cohort. But of course, there's other aspects of the program that you may want to study that's part of a community effort. Does that still need to go through PD&R, or can you still use your local university or institution? Can you just kind of, that's way down the road, but we have a lot going on in our community where we're trying to have this more collective impact. So everything's being studied and talked about. So I'm just trying to align all that together.
Great, thanks, Shantae. Allison, are you there? Can you touch on that?
Yeah, sure will. So as I said in the evaluation, the subject of this cohort is landlord incentives. So that's really what PD&R is going to be taking a look at their level with APT and the third-party researcher. The evaluation kind of burden on PHAs, like the stuff that you have to do, is very small and all occurs really within the MTW supplement and through any information you would be providing to APT through the evaluation of landlord incentives. If the agency wanted to optionally do some work with other outside evaluators on other parts of their MTW program, that's certainly something that you're able to do, but not something that's required. So, it's a great way to look at your activities, and we encourage you to do that. We would love to see any, research that comes out of that, but it's only optional for the PHA.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Allison. Great question, Shantae. Jenny, if you are still there, I'm going to send this one to you. So I'm not sure if I'm following. So the question is, if our ACC amendment will allow us to hire a landlord liaison, are we free to hire even prior to implementing the MTW supplement, with the understanding that they cannot implement any MTW flexibilities until the MTW supplement is approved?
I think the answer to
might
that,
actually be
two questions. I think it's two things, Rachel. And I mean, yes, you could. I mean, it just says you could today. I don't think it would require working within your MTW supplement. So, so yes, I mean, as we talked about earlier, the first thing to do is to get your MTW ACC amendment submitted and executed. If that answers that question. Marianne's still giving me a look like maybe not.
So I'm going to actually look to John to talk a little bit about funding flexibility and what can be paid for out of which funds and when, as a reminder.
Yep. No, I agree with what Jenny said. If you're using your admin fee funding, absolutely, you could hire this person right now. It's when if you are using your, say, HAP funding, your capital funding, your operating subsidy funding, we would advise you to have your ACC amendment executed, and then that funding flexibility kicks in, and under the admin fee, eligible uses, you could hire this person if you're using sort of a non-admin fee source of funds. So I would say get going. Yeah, as long as you say, you're not implementing the landlord liaison or kind of landlord incentive activities prior to an approved MTW supplement.
Great. Thank you, John, and thank you, Jenny and Rachel. By that, thank you. It looks like that answered your question, so thanks very much for that. Are there any other questions about anything we talked about today? Anything else? You can type them in the chat. You can come off mute. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talked about a lot of different things today, and the goal was to just kind of give you a broad understanding about what you need to know when, and you've got time to really get familiar with it. So here are some resources that we have been putting together, and if you have a question and you don't see a resource, let us know and we'll get it out to you. First is the selection notice, right? You all applied under the selection notice, and there's certain requirements within that, the certain waivers that you need to implement, that type of thing. So take a look at the selection notice. You need to be very familiar with that. The Mtw Operations Notice, it was finalized and published in the Federal Register in August of 2020, and it is available also on our website, kind of in a pretty format of the part that you need to know. Section 6 is on our website. As I think Jenny said, I encourage you to print it out, highlight it, tab it, become very familiar with it. You need to become familiar with it. It kind of describes the framework and all of kind of the requirements of the MTW program. There's a ton of resources on our MTW page, and I'm sure you've all looked at it already. There's resources about what the initial 39 agencies are doing. There's resources. It's showing you what some of the initial first 2 cohorts have gotten approved already. There's information there about certain best practices is up there. There's a lot of different, just a lot of really good information on our website for you to take a look at. The MTW expansion page and the training page. So on the expansion page, you'll find the, what do we call that? The online manual, where we've taken the operations notice and we have broken it up into bite-sized pieces. We've written it in, plain English. We've got good pieces there. So there's some really good information and resources there for you on that expansion page. The training page, all of the trainings that we've done so far are included on the training expansion page. This training is being recorded, and the slides and the video recording will be included on that training page on that exchange, or on the web. Sorry, I'm flipping it backwards, on the webinars page on HUD Exchange. So we've got a lot of really good resources for you. I think, key sexual election notice, operations notice, and then that online manual that you'll find on that training page. I think those are some really good places to get started. Next slide, please. And then I saw there was a question in there. Can we please have more advance notice than just a few days before the next slide, webinars? Absolutely. We hear you. We agree with you. This slide includes all of the onboarding webinars that have been scheduled for this cohort. So we'll hear from the evaluators a little bit more on February 16th. We will have a two-part finance series on March 9th and March 23rd. Please bring your CFOs to those trainings. And we will also then have a two-part MTW supplement to the PHA plan and trainings. The first one we'll talk a lot about, like putting together your supplement, how to use the operations notice, the waivers, the safe harbors, those types of things. And then the second one, the walkthrough, I think John mentioned that the MTW supplement will be submitted through an online system. And so Wendelin will kind of walk us through what that looks like. And then after that, we will have an office hours to answer any questions that you all have, whether it be on the finance, the supplement, or anything else. And I will say, and I meant to say this earlier, when I sent out that email to you all on Thursday, I meant to include kind of a helpful resources, which is kind of a lot of what we talked about today, and a snapshot, and I don't think I included that attachment. So I will include that as I will send that out to you guys once we get off the line here today. So you'll have all that information today. And Jennifer has a question for John. I'm going to ask you, John, could you please clarify, after the ACC has been signed by the agency and countersigned and executed by HUD, so it's HUD needs to sign it for it to count, we can have fungible funding but not implement the administrative plan changes, correct? I.e., we could use HAP funds for admin eligible items. John?
Correct, yeah. So anything requiring any sort of change to your policies in the admin plan, that would have to be in an MTW supplement, right? You couldn't do that. You'd have to wait for the MTW supplement to be approved. But using HAP funds for admin eligible items, that will be eligible. That you can do that after you receive that signed amendment back from us.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's starting the first of the month after the ACC amendment has been executed by HUD.
Yeah.
Jenny, is that what you were going to say?
Exactly, yes.
Great mind. Right, any other questions, comments, reactions? I'd be interested in seeing if this was helpful, if there's anything else that you'd want us to focus on, if it was the pace good, any feedback for us that we can take to make the future webinars that are starting again here in February a success. Please let us know. You can send it in the chat. You can shoot us an email at mtwlandlordincentives@hud.gov, or just let us know. Anything else? Good. Glad you found it helpful. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today, and welcome to MTW. Yay!
Thank you.
very exciting. Enjoy your afternoon. Look forward to spending a lot of good time with you guys, and we'll talk to you guys on the 16th. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.